Hey guys, it's Loud Guys. Today we are going to watch where is the worst season in US. Worst summers or worst winters. So we know that US is very big and it like gets all the type of climate you can, and the thing is like there is some very heavy winds and tornadoes also. We saw one video that most of the world tornadoes happen in USA only. So we need to see like what is the worst season in USA. So let's watch the
video.
I'm going to start off by talking about summers in desert areas. These are regions where you have just the highest overall temperatures. For the U.S., what's usually considered the hottest city is Yuma, Arizona, in the southwestern corner of the state along the Colorado River. Okay. In Yuma, in the summertime, there are 4 straight months, June through September, where the average high is over 100 for the month.
Whoa!
And there are 7 months of the year,
51
April
degrees.
through October, where you have several days within that month well over 100 degrees. And so in some of these desert areas, you can get summers that just last a long time. Again, it can be 6 or 7 straight months of temperatures over 100, certainly well over 90. And to go along with this, it's almost always sunny. So the sun is just always pounding down on you. It's just relentless. There's often no shade to be found. If you're in the cities, you also have the urban heat island effect going on with all the concrete and asphalt. And it can be generally dangerous to be out in desert summers without sunscreen. Yuma is usually considered the sunniest city in the U.S., and between March and October, at least 90% of the daylight hours has sunshine. But it isn't just the number of days over 100 degrees, it's also the number of days over 110 or even 115 degrees.
Wow!
In humid places, it might hit 100 degrees every now and then in an extreme summer day, but it's really common to be well over 100, again, well over 110 quite often in a place like Yuma. And with temperatures like that, the fact that it's a dry heat doesn't matter too much because it's just so freaking hot.
How are people living
but one
there?
huge difference between dry and humid summers, so in this case a desert, at night the temperature cools down quite a bit. So even in Yuma, in those months where the high temperature is over 100, the low temperature might be anywhere between the 50s and mid 70s. But for these dry climates with these really high temperatures, it's only extreme heat for the middle of the day. It's usually about 10 a.m. to about 6 p.m. where the temperatures are really hot. So for a place like Yuma or even Phoenix, it really isn't any better than Yuma, as long as you can stay inside and air conditioning during the middle of the day in the middle of the summer.
It looks very beautiful.
That bad. But if you need to be outside and or the air conditioning isn't working, well, look out.
And a lot of people live
Okay,
there.
so those are desert summers. What about hot, swampy, humid summers? And my example city for this category is going to be New Orleans. The biggest difference between a desert and swampy type summer is going to be the humidity. In a place like New Orleans, the highest temperatures during the summer aren't going to reach the same high peaks as they are in the desert. For example, there are only 3 months of the year, June through August, where the average high temperature in New Orleans is over 90 degrees. However, there are about 6 months of the year, May through October, where you are going to experience temperatures over 90 degrees. So what are the big differences with having a really humid summer as opposed to a hot, dry one?
Too much sweat.
For all 12 months of the year, the average relative humidity in New Orleans is over 72%. And in those really hot summer months, it ranges between 76 and 80% relative humidity on average. And when the relative humidity is that high, you don't get the evaporative cooling effect that you normally would get when you have sweat evaporating. So you just stay hot and sticky and disgusting all day. But to me, the biggest difference between a dry heat and a humid heat is the nighttime temperatures. So again, for Yuma or other places in the desert, the overnight low temperature, even during the summer, is going to drop quite a bit.
Yeah,
in a humid climate like New Orleans, the overnight low isn't going to be that much lower than the overall high of the day. And if you're familiar with southern summers, you know even during the middle of the night, it's pretty humid and sticky.
Yeah, I know.
And that's also evidenced by the fact that in New Orleans, during the summertime, the percent possible sunshine during daylight hours is only about 60 to 65%. A lot of cloud cover, a lot of rain, a lot of storms, a lot of humidity during the summer makes the summers in New Orleans pretty gross. Ooh. And the third place in the U.S. I'm going to look at for awful summers is Austin, Texas. This is where you have summertime temperatures really hot like the Southwest, although not quite as hot as Phoenix or Yuma. And you have summertime humidity that's pretty high like the Southeast, although not quite as bad as New Orleans.
It is worse on both parts.
In Austin, you have 4 straight months where the average daily high is over 91 degrees. And 7 months of the year, April through October, where you're going to experience temperatures over 90 degrees at some point during the month,
July and August.
with temperatures over 100 degrees being very common in May through September. So not quite as bad as Yuma or Phoenix, but the relative humidity during the summer months is in the 60%
Makes
range.
it very bad.
Phoenix during the summer months, relative humidity is between 19 and 36%. So going back to Austin, during the summertime, the dew points are in the upper 60s, which is pretty humid. But I recently spent time in what might be the worst city on earth for the combination of heat and humidity. And that would be Abidjan, Ivory Coast. This place was
Africa.
awful to walk around. I couldn't believe how hot and humid it was. I was there in December where the average high temperature was only 86 degrees. In fact, there isn't a single month in Abidjan where the average high is over 90. For all 12 months of the year, the average relative humidity in Abidjan is over 80%. There were days when I was there where the high might have been 87 and the low was 81 with a dew point of like 80. So if you ever want to feel the saying, it's not the heat, it's the humidity, check out Abidjan, Ivory Coast.
Oh, I don't want to
So
go
those are what
there.
I would consider the worst summers in the U.S. as well as possibly the worst summer on Earth. But let's take a look at some of the worst winters in the U.S.
Wow.
I'm going to start by talking
But
about
it's
Grand
beautiful.
Forks, North Dakota, in the northeastern portion of the state, not too far from the Canadian border. And winters in the Great Plains are where you're going to have the absolute lowest temperatures. You have that really cold Arctic air coming down from Canada that's blowing across the plains, really high winds. So from eastern Montana to North Dakota to northern Minnesota is
so
where you're going to
many,
get the absolute
warm winds,
coldest temperatures and the
mild
overnight
winds,
lows in
cold.
the contiguous U.S. during winter. I'm choosing Grand Forks because it's not that far from Winnipeg, Manitoba, which is considered the coldest big city in North America. In Grand Forks, for the 3 months, December through February, the average high is 21 degrees or lower, with it only being 16 degrees.
Record
in
low is
January.
minus 41
also,
degrees.
during those same 3 months, December is the warmest, with the average low being 4 degrees. From the months November through March, you'll experience overnight lows in the negatives on the Fahrenheit scale multiple times. And even into March, the average low is 15 degrees. And during the winters here, you might get a couple of months straight where there isn't a single temperature over freezing. You also have extremely high winds just howling across the plains during the winter. However, you don't really get that much snow. This isn't a very wet part of the country. The snowiest month in Grand Forks is December, which only gets 12 inches of snow. January gets only 10 inches.
But it looks
and in
a
fact, there are
lot
only
more.
on average 48 inches of snow during the entire year in Grand Forks. So the northern Great Plains have some incredibly cold winters, but let's use that talk about snow as segue into somewhere else with some horrible winters. For this, I'm going to Houghton, Michigan, which sits on the north shore of the Upper Peninsula on the shores of Lake Superior. And so similar to how New Orleans isn't quite as hot as Yuma in the summer, Houghton isn't quite as cold as Grand Forks in the winter, but there's a lot more snow. In fact, Houghton is one of the snowiest
because of
towns in the entire
humidity.
contiguous U.S. Earlier, I had mentioned how Grand Forks gets about 48 inches of snow per year, but Houghton gets 69 inches of snow just in January and about 208 inches of snow for the entire year. And in fact, in November, December, and January, it snows about half of the days of the month. But the reason why you get so much snow
So
here
terrible.
is the lake effect. So you can look at snowfall maps for the Midwest, and there's always a lot more on the east side of the Great Lakes than the west side. And Houghton, being up here on the shore of Lake Superior, has this giant lake to the north and west. But of course, to get all that snow, it also has to be cold. However, it's pretty balmy in Houghton compared to Grand Forks, with every month of the year the average high being over 22 degrees and the average high being below freezing only 3 months of the year. Although temperatures below freezing are certainly going to be common there's not a single month in Houghton where the average low is below 9 degrees. So in January in Grand Forks, you might have a high temperature of 16
Very nice
and a low of
cultures.
-3. But in Houghton, it might be a balmy 22 with a low of 10. But you'll be shoveling a ton of snow. Houghton is one of the snowiest smaller towns in the U.S., but the snowiest big cities in the U.S. are in upstate and western New York, Syracuse, Rochester, and Buffalo. But whether you're in Houghton or in upstate or western New York, you're measuring snow in feet. So when you compare some of the worst Great Plains winters to some of the worst Great Lakes winters, it comes down to how much you
looks
can
like
handle
Apocalypse
extreme cold
movie.
versus shoveling a lot of snow. But certainly when it comes to winters in the U.S., Alaska is going to be the worst.
Of
Yeah.
The
course.
town of Utqiagvik, which used to be referred to as Barrow, is on the north shore of the state, right along the Arctic Ocean. Here, December through March, the average high is below 0 Fahrenheit, with the
What?
warmest month being December,
Zero-
where the average high is
0
minus
degrees is
0.4
high.
Fahrenheit. And even in November and April, the average high is below 12 degrees. And also between November and April, the average overnight low is below 0 Fahrenheit. And in fact, December through March, the average overnight low is under minus 12 Fahrenheit.
Oh.
But hey, it gets super cold, but it doesn't get that much snow. Only 46 inches of snow on average per year. So life here has to be rough, with even in October and May, the average
Very
high temperature is
cold
below
winds.
freezing. And not just that, you have
Oh,
no
wow.
sunshine during the middle of the winter either. So there's basically no sun in December or January.
No
You
sun.
put all those things together, and the winters in Utqiagvik might be the very worst
Get
of the
out.
entire U.S.
Darkest days.
I did want to also mention one other type winter that is pretty horrible, although I don't think as horrible as the other ones. That's the winters in Seattle. For temperatures in Seattle during the winter, it's not that bad. It's going to be well over 40 degrees even in the coldest months. And even the average overnight lows in the middle of the winter are just a little below freezing, which isn't much different than here in Chattanooga. However, what can make the winters in Seattle really bad for many people is just for how long it might stay overcast and gray. So again, for Yuma, the percent possible sunshine during the daylight hours in the summer is over 90%.
My
The percent
God.
possible sunshine for Seattle in the winter is under 26%. The humidity is really high during the winter, at least 78%, so it's just always damp. There are at least 14 inches of rain every month between October and April, and over 18 inches of rain November through January. So for many people, the winters in Seattle or perhaps the Canadian West Coast would be the worst possible winters because you see
But
so little
in
sunshine.
photos, this looks
you can
beautiful.
go to Grand Forks in January.
Yes.
It might be minus 10 degrees, but the sun is shining brightly above you. So if you're someone that suffers from seasonal affective disorder, then Seattle might be a pretty awful place for you to live, and it gets even worse going up the Canadian West Coast. And the cloudiest town in the overall U.S. is Cold Bay, Alaska,
Cold
in the Aleutian
Bay.
Islands. There's an average of 304 overcast days per year. And certainly once you get up into the northwest
When they see the
territories
sun.
of Nunavut in Canada or central and northern Siberia and Russia, the winters can get a lot worse than what we have in the contiguous U.S. But nonetheless, the northern Great Plains and lake effect side of the Great Lakes winters are pretty awful.
I would choose winters over summers because I think so summers are something you cannot live because like too much heat, and also if humidity is there, then it is very very problematic. Like in my place also it gets very very humid, and even at night it does not cool down, and like even if you're wearing nothing you would still be sweating, and that's how the climate goes here, and it's very very hard to say.
I would say summers are like very irritating season,
Yeah.
I would say, but we have that. I like summers because of the mangoes only.
Yeah.
Because I really enjoy the mango shakes and this beautiful fruit. I would say it's very yummy. But I would say these summers are like worst over here where we live, because it's always sweating no matter how many times you take shower, 2 to 3 times a day, and still even if you have like AC, but still you feel like, oh, what is missing, and then you just go out. But still we always wait for the winters, and we experience winters for like two and a half months, maybe not more than that. Other months we only have summers here.
And also our winters are very comfortable, like no snow, nothing like that. But I think so like having snow and having that overcast is also very difficult. Like it becomes so gloomy, I think so, after a point of time. So what do you guys think about it? Do let us know in the comment section below. So do like, share, and
Subscribe.
Bye.
Bye.